Welcome to the art time-lapse for Year 3 in Animal Crossing New Horizons. I'm Dear Darling, and of course something a little bit different. In all my previous other art time-lapses, I have not commentated over top, but I thought it'd be fun to do, I suppose, for this sort of like anniversary-based one. So I can sort of share a bit of insights of what I was thinking and what's going on. So right now, of course, I'm just, I cut out a bit, well, I didn't record the bit at the beginning where I was just basically messing around with some of Thubmnail ideas and trying to figure out exactly what's going on. This is the sort of idea I came up with because I wanted a sort of multi-purpose thumbnail art where I wanted a sort of banner-like thing where everything is quite contained horizontally and I can update my Twitter and YouTube banner. And of course I did want to incorporate the 10 residents of Fawnhollow, well 11 I suppose, including D. So I messed around and did some basic, very basic shapes, and now what I'm doing right now is basically doing a rough sketch where I'm sort of trying to figure out exactly the details and where exactly everyone's going to be. You can see some things did change initially because Lily, I initially wanted to have looking back at Biscuit and watering the flower, but then I decided it was better to have her crouching because I wanted a bit of variation in the verticality, I suppose, of the sketches. Otherwise everything looks very sort of straight on with the sort of depth and perception with everything that happened. Here you can see I'm sort of struggling with Vivian because initially I wanted her picking off a fruit from a tree, but I was like, that's going to be a little bit confusing about the size of a fruit on a tree and that sort of thing. So instead I have her sort of basically mirroring Rowan, and they're just sort of like walking next to each other, and here I'm just trying to figure out what sort of pose I want Dee to be in. Obviously the most basic pose I could do is just have her sitting on the bench looking straight on, but I thought that would look a little bit like unnerving, I suppose, a little bit uncanny, so I wanted a little bit of asymmetry in it. So she's got like a sort of lean to her side, it's kind of doing like a model-esque pose, I suppose. So the general concept of this one is basically meant to be showing the passage of time. You can see those sort of faded black and white bars I'm using as my guidelines, where it fades from like the different seasons and that sort of thing. And of course from the villages in my island, some of them represent, or I suppose are patrons, I suppose, of that season. With Fauna and Phoebe, of course, being night, day and night, and or life and death, I suppose, in that sort of aspect. And here we got Biscuit and Lily, who embody like spring and water. So we have Biscuit, of course, just sort of splashing about in a rainy puddle, and with Lily tending to the spring flowers for that bloom. So here I'm doing a refined sketch on top of my previous rough sketch, which I don't usually do. I only do it for like really big illustrations, and you notice I probably don't do that all that often in the other sort of thumbnail art time lapses. But this one I wanted to sort of like not save a bit of time, it's like put the work in now, so when I do the line art it's a lot easier. Here I'm drawing Phoebe, and she's got a bit of a sort of like witchy goth-esque vibe because she's, you know, in the nighttime zone. And then we've got Amelia and Apollo walking together in the winter wonderland, I suppose. With Amelia and they've got linked arms or linked wings, I suppose, and Amelia just casually pointing out a nice little snowflake. Then I decided to draw Dee because, you know, Dee is the most important part of this. Dee is the name I've given to this dear character, I suppose, who I used to represent me, if you don't know. And it was a lot of just trying to sort of work out exactly how the clothing is going to sort of fit and fold over her legs, what sort of expression do I want her to have, and, you know, I thought I'd put in this refined sketch now a lot of the clothing folds, which I don't usually do in a lot of sketches. A lot of time I sort of just improvise it, and you'll see when it comes to shading I do sort of improvise that a lot anyway. Of course hands are quite difficult, so if you can see me, I apologise, it might be a little bit disorientating, but I tend to rotate and zoom in quite a lot. Normally I try not to do that all too much, try and keep it a lot more focused and a lot less like hectic, I suppose, when looking at these art thumbnail time lapses. But this time I didn't, because I just sort of like went all in. You can see I'm using a thing in Clip Studio Paint to really understand the perspective of what's going on, and you'll notice that I sort of cheat with a perspective. I cheat quite a lot in this sort of art. In this thumbnail art, the perspectives don't quite match up with everything. Like the perspective for the town hall doesn't match up with a perspective, a bench doesn't quite match up with a perspective of some of the villagers walking around. But lucky with these thumbnail arts is they're often quite small, so you don't really notice that when they're very small. It's not often you'll see them blown up, I suppose, to your entire monitor, where you can actually start to pick out and be like, hey, there's a little bit of discrepancy with the perspective. The most important thing when it actually comes to these thumbnail arts is actually making sure it's very clear and readable from a distance, which is why I have this not display, I suppose, but like this mini version of it in the top left, so I can see exactly what's going on. Of course, it's not very informative right now with a sketch, but you can sort of see the general shapes as they come to life. You see early on right now that Dee doesn't quite look like herself. She looks like a very sort of cutified version of herself. I do end up changing that later on because I was getting kind of fed up with it and it didn't really feel like her. And you also notice in these Animal Crossing villages that there's sort of like a weird mix of anthropomorphization and not anthropomorphization, because in the previous thumbnail art I did, I anthropomorphized them quite a lot, like I stretched out proportions, that sort of thing, and I think it made them look a little bit uncanny, and I wasn't quite pleased with how that looked. So this time I wanted to try and keep it a little bit closer to what they actually look like in the game. Of course, they are sort of stretched that bit, and it's most evident with like Raymond. He's lost his basically like egg-shaped head, and he's got a much more cat-shaped head, and he's stretched out a little bit. But it works pretty well for a lot of the other ones, like Vivian and Audie and Rowan. I think especially with all three of them just look quite normal. So here I'm just sort of trying to figure out what the flora is going to be in the background. Of course, because I want a passage of time, passage of seasons, I'm going to try and represent all the different types of flora that you can find in Animal Crossing. So not all the things eventually make it actually to the actual line and sketch phase, and you can see in the sky I've got a load of different things. I've got like a rainy weather effect, I've got a snowy effect, and then I put some other things in to try and represent each of the seasons. I'm really struggling right now with Dee's face, because looking at it right now, I can certainly say with retrospect, I'm like, this does not look like Dee, and it does not look like how I normally drew Dee, and I couldn't quite figure out why exactly. And what I've settled on is I think she looked a bit too cute, and I think I've left a bit too much like forehead space, and it's just like her entire face is sort of squashed together, which is not really how I draw her. Here I'm just doing the line art. The line art is not very interesting. I've just downloaded some brushes from the Clip Studio asset store. I'm using a thick outline for most of the outside parts of the lines. And then when it comes to the details on the inside, I use a thinner brush, because that, I think, like gives us a nice sort of distribution of the different weights. I don't know what that pause was, to be honest. And this is something I also don't usually do as well, is I'm putting quite a lot of detail, I suppose, into the line-up for this one, because the clothing does have quite a lot of detail, but a lot of times I tend to take shortcuts when I draw thumbnail art, because you don't normally see the detail a lot of the time. So I might not draw the frills, I might not draw like all the individual sort of like puffy parts, I suppose, of a coat and that sort of thing. But this time I'm really trying to be a little bit more diligent about that sort of thing. Even though I could take shortcuts, because it is after all, a thumbnail art, it is also a celebration, I suppose, of 2 years in Animal Crossing and New Horizons of daily uploads. So I do want to actually put in the effort. So we're just moving on to all these sort of things. I'm trying to keep it fairly true to exactly what the clothings are in the game and that sort of thing. And I try to stick to the game as much as I can. You can see I redrew Dee's shoe there, because then I realised that her leg was at the completely wrong perspective, and here I realised on the Rowan sketch that he had the same, his right leg and his left leg and his left arm going up at the same time, which is not how people run if you try and imagine it. Unless people are robots, people sort of do the opposite arms and legs. So here we are, people say line art tends to be the most boring part, I suppose, of actually rendering sort of things, and to a certain degree it is, but I do find it comforting to a certain extent, because it's sort of just like, it's very formulaic what you had to do. You got your base sketch, you just had to sort of bring it to life with a line art, and as long as you put a bit of effort in to put in all those little details, even if it might look a little bit crowded right now with the amount of details I'm putting in, it really does pay off when you start putting the colours in. Is what I think. So of course, Vivian here, she's got like a fashion bag. I did actually check what bags, like what umbrellas, what ice lolly that the villagers have, to make sure that it's as accurate as possible. Some things, of course, do change, like there's no scarves that Vivian can actually wear, and the flowers that the villagers wear on their head, I think they can only wear the crowns rather than individual flowers. But you got to make some artistic changes, I suppose, here and there, just for simplicity's sake, and for the fact that the art style is, of course, a little bit different from the true Animal Crossing art style. I'm not sure technique-wise there's anything really important I'm doing here. I'm using a lot more layers than usual, and you'll see, especially when it comes to colouring, that I'll use far more layers than I usually do in different things. Normally I try and keep colours to maybe 1 or 2 layers, but this time I put everything on different layers, just in case I want to change colours or want to change line arts and things separately. So all the different seasons, all the different all the villages are basically paired off into their line arts, just to make things a little bit simpler if I wanted to change just one aspect of it at once, like one pair of them at once or not, then this would make things, of course, a lot easier. This fauna pose, you'll see, does not quite stay, at least her head pose doesn't. I wanted her to initially sort of quite wistfully sort of be looking at the camera, but a little trouble I ran into is because of Fauna's eyes, it's a little bit difficult to convey the right expressions, because she doesn't have pupils or anything, she just has basically block eyes which always look very surprised. so that ends up changing. Here I'm using another tool in Clip Studio Paint, which is the symmetric ruler, because of course the Townhall from this perspective is symmetric. So I've got something where if I draw on the left side of the ruler, it will draw the mirror opposite on the right side of the ruler, so that's how I'm drawing this so accurately, and I'm using straight lines. Oh, you can actually see in the sketch here, I initially planned to put in Tomnik and Isabel into the windows to give them a little bit of a cameo, but the problem is Audie and Raymond cover up the window, so I was like, that's a bit pointless to do that anyway. You can always see my references popping in here and there, like especially with the clothes and with the villagers, and a lot of screenshots from the game, just to make sure I'm completely accurate to how the game looks. And also it's very helpful because I can sort of eyedrop of the colours to make them definitely give it that sort of feel. There was just a split second, like 10 seconds ago, where I was colouring some extra thick line art at D because, obviously you can see quite a lot of her legs there, and I'm just like, that certainly looks a little bit suspicious, and that's not what I wanted, quite what I wanted. But then I just ended up being like, oh, we'll put tights on her instead of blocking it in with line art, because I didn't think it looked very good. There we got her like very iconic pink and orange irises, her eyes. I think very, very pretty, but even now if you look at it, you're just like, this doesn't look right, this doesn't look like D for some reason. I can't put my finger on why. So here, a lot of the colours are actually quite difficult because my Animal Crossing villager in-game uses, of course, these brown clothings, but Dee's actually brown herself, so there's a lot of trying to figure out exactly which browns to use to make sure that, the clothes don't sort of just blend in too much. You want things to pop when they do pop, and you want things to have enough of a contrast that they don't feel like they're just sort of melding together. You can also see a thing I did start to do with these villagers is I basically match their clothing choices to their favourite colours, and Rowan's is blue and grey, but you can't actually get whatever item this is called in blue. And then, I did it a little bit and I was like, it's not really going to fit the summer thematic which has got going on, so I changed it to that yellow and orange one instead. Audie still kept a green one because I thought the green one was like, it felt fresh and refreshing enough for it to stick around. Here we got Raymond's, and by the way, like these sort of patterns, these like checkered patterns are an absolute nightmare to draw. So you can see I'm basically bouncing around with like 4 different layers. I'm basically making it stripes and then erasing the stripes and just making sure the stripes follow exactly like how the sleeves go, and then it's just an utter nightmare to absolutely get done. And I had to do this before in Vivian's one, so when I actually came to doing the sweater, instead of actually drawing all the like knots in the sweater and that sort of thing, I just got a pattern brush to do it simply. Raymond's head also gave me a little bit of trouble because I'm just like, even now it still looks a little bit strange, but what can you really do? I'm not really sure if there's much to say about Vivian's in particular. I mess around with the colours a bit because Vivian's favourite colour is purple, but there's no purple bowler hat, and I really wanted her to wear that bowler hat because I thought it was really cute. So I was like, okay, we can make her wear sort of purple and red, but both that still fits her awesome colours. There's not really much to say about Apollo and Media. They're, I suppose, quite accurate to their representation and that sort of thing, and the reason I'm drawing them together because I like to imagine that they're perhaps in a relationship or something. At least on my Fawnhollow variants are. Well, actually, I don't know. I suppose it's none of my business, to be honest. But anyway, oh yeah, the pansies here, I wasn't initially sure if I wanted to give a line art or not. I ended up giving them a line art anyway because I thought it was a key part of Lily's pose and that sort of thing. So this isn't just very interesting, it's just sort of me slowly getting through and colouring all the different villages, getting that work done. This is, of course, Biscuit doing the joy reaction, so I've got to get that in there. I also don't know why, this is me rendering the water to try and make it look much more watery, I suppose, because I don't think there actually are puddles in New Horizons or anything like that, so I don't really have any reference to go off, so I don't know why I rendered it like so much as well. So this is like the first, oh, not the first process, but this is just the process of me sort of redrawing Fauna's head because I was like, I hate how it looks. It's really difficult to get the right expression that I want from Fauna because there's not a lot to work with, I suppose. With her eyes, and eyes are very expressive things, and you can obviously direct them where people are looking, but with Fauna you kind of don't have that luxury, so I just decided to change it so it's now a sort of mirror of Phoebe's pose, with Phoebe looking upwards and Fauna looking down to the ground. This is where I'm actually starting to redraw Dee's head because I hated her head. This was actually from the start of New Day. Like, I went to sleep and I was just really frustrated because I was like, I hated how her Dee's head looked, and I was like, I can do better. Or at least I can make it look a little bit more like Dee. So this is, I think I started referencing my Talos Principle art, which was one of the things where she looks directly forwards, because Deers looking directly forwards look very different from how Deers look as they turn their head to the side because, of their snout protrusion, I suppose. So, I changed it up, and I think it looks better. I think it looks more like how I usually draw Dee, so I was a lot more satisfied with that sort of thing. I changed her bows, so instead of resting on top of her head, they're sort of like quite anime style, they're like butterfly bows, tucked behind her neck, which I think gives her quite a nice silhouette. Even now, I think maybe her head's a little bit too squashed compared to usual, but I at least think it's a lot better. So, you know, I'm just redoing all the colours and that sort of thing. Oh yeah, there I was experimenting with perhaps doing a little bit of a different eye, like maybe she had like one of her irises was basically upside down to the other, because Dee has a very sort of pink and orange thematic going on. Those are her sort of image colours, so I like to mess around with that. And there I just sort of closed Fawna's eyes because I was like, this is a nuisance to mess around with. So here you can sort of see the process of me basically wanting to have a sort of like montage of the different seasons. So I drew all the different skies separately, only in that sort of small column they appear in, and then I use layer masks to erase the parts which I didn't want displayed to try and get this nice sort of transition. I use a soft airbrush and that sort of thing, and you might have noticed I switched around some of the skies because I wanted a nicer sort of gradient going on. And here I'm just putting in the shooting stars that you often see at night. Which reminds me that I think there's some shooting stars tonight in Fawnhollow, but I'm not actually going to go wish upon them because I don't really need to. You can see in the sketch as well, actually, but my initial idea was to basically have a cloud sort of overlap the boundaries and that sort of thing and spill into each other, and all the different effects spill into each other, but then I thought that looked really messy, and the colour clash was not something I was particularly fond of. So instead I kept them very sort of like secluded to their own zones. So yeah, there's a bit of a lens flare going on in the summer section. This middle section, which is a bit ambiguous what it is. I guess it's like between summer and autumn. So I put some contrails in there. I downloaded a nice sort of like triangle brush just off the Clip Studio asset store because that's probably the easiest way to get this grass done, and you know I was having trouble with exactly what I wanted with that. You might notice that in spring it's a little bit weird because it's half raining and half not raining, because I realised afterwards that Biscuit is messing around as if he was playing in the rain, and then Lily is watering flowers as if it was not raining. So I was like, that's a little bit weird, a little bit inconsistent, but you know, I guess I'll just make it half rain. You can also notice that snow has a different pattern in New Horizons. In the previous versions there actually used to be different patterns of grass and that sort of thing. You could have triangles, squares or circles, but in New Horizons they've all been homogenised, I suppose, to just triangles, except for snow, which is now circles, so I don't know what's up with that. This is me just sort of filling in the tiles, putting a little bit more detail in. There's not really much to say about this. The background I'm a lot sloppier with, you'll see it when I actually start drawing the trees and that sort of thing, because of course the characters are the main focus of a thumbnail art, so that's the part I want to draw your attention, so it doesn't matter if this part is a lot more simplified because it's going to be more bare bones. You aren't going to notice it because one, the characters are in front of it, and two, it's also quite small in the background. So here's me just drawing brick again. I'm using that very useful symmetric ruler tool to just, you know, speed things up a little bit. Here I think I'm actually just normally I use a different layer on top and use a layer style, normally multiply or soft or hard light, to do my shadows. If you don't know what those are, you should definitely look them up. They're very useful. In Photoshop can do them, Clip Studio Paint. I think most digital art programs can do them, but here I think I'm just directly eyedropping colours from that screenshot I taken over there. That's not my screenshot, by the way, I just found it on the internet, and by the way, always use references. It's my number one artistic tip to you. I'm not an expert artist or anything like that, but references are so important. I use references, of course, all the time. Some things, you know, I draw from memory, but a lot of the times I'm just drawing things completely from reference, and that is definitely how you should be drawing things. Drawing things from memory is difficult and annoying when references are just easy. So I'll say, so here we are, we're drawing a palm tree. Of course, you can't really have a palm tree over here without putting some sand underneath, but, you know. And you can notice I'm being very lazy with how I'm drawing these leaves, and you know, I'm copy pasting a lot of the things over and over again. Like I'm only drawing one tree and copying and pasting it. It's just something to just speed up the processes. There's no point in me drawing individual trees every single time, because you probably won't even be able to notice if they were copy pasted or not copy or pasted. So that's why I'm just sort of making things easy for myself. You know, you want to focus on the things which are important, like the characters and that sort of thing. Here I'm drawing in some stuff in the foreground because I thought the corners looked particularly empty. I'm also being quite lax and lazy with them because I'm just going to put a bit of a blur filter over the top of them, because to get a bit of like a depth perception, I suppose, in there. Here I'm just drawing some sort of particle effects around in the foreground, so I've got some sort of spring blossoms, I've got some autumn leaves, and I've got some snowflakes in the winter section. Put a little bit of some like wind effects in, but I didn't want to put too much in, otherwise it's a little bit busy. And now we're onto the shading part of it. Now the shading in this piece is actually a little bit weird because the light source is constantly changing throughout the piece. It basically starts at the very left and then it sweeps across upwards and then ends at the very right. So all these characters are basically under a different directional source of lighting, which of course does not make sense in real life. And if you did that in an actual piece, it would be probably bad practice. But I'm doing it in this piece, of course, because I'm doing it as a montage throughout the entire year. So I think it fits quite well. You can see my sort of shading technique. One what I've adopted kind of recently is I first go over with like a normal shading in a lighter colour, and then I go with a darker shading to add a little bit of depth in the shading I've already done. So, shadows are 1.5 shadows. I learned that from some Japanese artist YouTube, and I was like, oh, I really like this style, so I'll go with it. You can see the rest of the layer styles I also do for rendering the entire picture. I don't do all of them in this one, because it's just like unneeded, a lot of the things, and there's a lot of characters to render, so forgive me for taking some shortcuts here and there. So I basically have shadows, I have 1.5 shadows, I have highlights for things which are particularly glossy and shiny, I have reflected light, which is normally the ground, and reflected up underneath them to give like tie them into the sort of area they're in. So of course, like goes in the summer, I give like an orange sort of reflected light, goes in spring, I give like a green and yellow reflected light, etc, etc, etc. And then I have a slight gradient where I lighten the villagers at the top and the characters at the top, and I darken the characters towards their feet. It's very, very slight, and it's kind of imperceptible, but I also tint them with slight colours fitting in the season they're in, just to try and tie them together a little bit. Normally I would use a gradient map, I suppose, to tie them the colour schemes a little bit better, a little bit closer. I have a gradient map, and I'll put it on overlay mode, and I'll put it on lower opacity to sort of basically bring the colours closer together to a uniform palette. But of course the palette is all over the place in this video because we've got all sorts of different seasons going on. So I decided not to do that because that would also mean I would have to have like 8 different palettes or something, and I didn't really want to think about that. Even if I'm not making the palettes myself, it's still quite a lot of effort. So yeah, this is just regular shading things going on. The shading colours, of course I'm not using completely solid grey for a lot of shading, and if you're a beginner artist, I would recommend you don't do that as well. It's always nice to put a little bit of a colour tinge to give your piece a little bit of a different feel. So of course, like in these 2 autumnal characters, I was giving a brown and orange shading. Here in winter I'm giving a very quite sharp blue shading, and it gives a very warm impression or a cool impression respectively. And if you want to give off a different seasonal impression, especially that I'm trying to do right now, you want your colours to basically match. So all the shading I'm doing is matching, all the highlights I'm doing is matching, even the colour choice for the animals slightly leans into those sort of directions. There's not really much to say apart from, well, I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to add on about my shading. I'm using just like one of the default brushes. I think for most of it I'm using the opaque watercolour, but I'm also sometimes using an airbrush for when things are like quite round and I want to give a bit of a softer transition, I suppose, for the shade. But I like using the opaque watercolour, and I like using it on lower opacity because that gives a sort of very sort of painterly effect if I start like building up the colours just like that. Here I just realised I forgot to actually render the door, but mainly because D's in front of it and you can't really tell what's going on, so it doesn't really matter anyway. I'm adding some floor shadows to ground the villagers so it doesn't look like they're just floating on top of a random image. Here I'm colouring in the line art to try and sort of unify all the elements together, and here I'm just putting, to make the characters pop out a little bit, I'm putting a little bit of a glowy outline around them because, otherwise we sort of blend into the background a little bit too much. And here I'm just making the sort of the meta stuff of the YouTube channel, and it's not that interesting, so I guess that's kind of it. And I'll round it up by saying thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed my sort of commentary over the top. If you have any questions about what I do, about my process, please put them down below, but otherwise like, comment and subscribe, and until next time, I suppose bye bye for now. I think I said that a little bit too early, but it's still like 5 seconds. Hold on. Bye bye for now.